Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Brandon Ramakko Podcast. Today I have with me Jonathan Niziol, and he's going to share a little bit about his story. So he is a model, a personal trainer, and a wellness advocate. And he has, as I mentioned, a bit of an interesting story. Do you have anything to add about, if you can add a bit where you come from, where you are?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me, Brandon. I appreciate it very much. I am originally from Canada, born and raised, but I am coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas. I got tired of Canadian winters and
Same here.
decided I'm a dual citizen, thankfully. So I've lived all over the States for school and work, and I thought I'm going to try something different. And Texas is a wonderful place with wonderful people, and yeah, I'm glad I made the move. I've been here just going on 5 years. So
Nice.
yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. I'm in Indonesia because I can't stand the Canadian winters. You're lucky with the dual citizenship, though. You are so
Yes.
lucky.
Yes. My father was born and raised in Michigan, and I was going to school in Philadelphia and was having trouble with visas because I was like a 16-year-old kid, and I'd come back from school and I'd forget like one of the papers or pages of my visa, and I'd be stuck in customs for like 8 hours, and my parents were sitting outside of the airport, and it was like a 2.5-hour drive from our farm to the airport, and they're like, we just got to get this kid his dual citizenship. Like, so, and I always say after life, it's the greatest gift that they could have given me because it's opened up so many opportunities for work and everything. It's a fantastic thing to have, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of my audience doesn't realize, and well, I lived in the States for 5 or 6 years myself. A lot of people in the States and a lot of Canadians don't realize that the immigration system in the States is one of the most challenging ones in the world for legal immigration.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's very stringent. It's interesting how that works that way. But yes, they are very, very particular about who they let in and making sure that Americans have jobs first. And yeah, it's very, very strict.
And
For legal.
it's quite a topical topic because of all the migrants, and particularly Texas. But of course, Texas was shipping them to. I know we're a little off topic from your story, but Texas is shipping them to New York and Chicago, right? Or do you
Yeah,
know?
I believe so.
Yeah.
That's from. Yeah, I don't usually get too much into politics, but yeah, I mean, we're a border state, right? So it's we're on the front lines, and we're being affected directly by it. And yeah, I guess the governor just said, okay, we'll disperse. And like I said, I don't really talk too much politics, but yeah, it's tough being a border state. It's but it's nice and warm down here.
Yeah, that is true.
So we'll take that.
So, if we can get to your story, because I have a lot of people sort of challenged with change. So many people who want to change. They want to change their diet. They want to become more active. They want to, get off of drugs, and they're a little bit lost about how to get started. Now, I do some life coaching on the side, and I do as much as I can. And of course, I advise them on resources. But I think it's always good to hear people's stories that were success stories, so you can learn from that. So I understand you went through a real tough time in your 20s.
Yes. So my story really begins. Well, like I said, I grew up in Canada. I grew up on a 500-acre cattle farm in Canada, and had a
Wow.
wonderful upbringing. It was fantastic. But the day before my 21st birthday is where you talk about change, man. Like, this is where it flipped the script, and my mom passed away very suddenly and very unexpectedly. The day before my 21st birthday, she wasn't anything like it was very sudden. So it shattered my world as I knew it, and my whole world changed, and things started to change after that. It was very soon after that I was diagnosed with having clinical depression and severe anxiety and panic disorder and self-harm. And I had never heard those things before. This is 21 years ago, and I didn't like. It wasn't talked about as much then. Thankfully, I had a childhood where I didn't deal with stuff like that. Even back then, though, if somebody was a bit anxious, they would just be like, "Oh, they're a worrier. They just worry." Like, or if somebody was depressed, they just be like, "Oh, just buck up, go for a walk, something." So yeah, I never heard those words before. I just thought I'm going crazy, and nobody's ever felt this way before in my life. I started taking medication once my doctor explained it to me, and I started to educate myself on it a bit, but what I really started to do was to self-medicate, and that was drinking. And that was the first, there's a whole, that's why we're here. But the drinking was the first crutch, first thing that I started to self-medicate with, and quickly became a problem, non-functioning alcoholic for a number of years. My life, everything around me was crumbling, and I knew it. I knew I was an alcoholic. I knew that I just resigned to the fact that, okay, I'm going to be an alcoholic the rest of my life. This is it. I have all the respect to people who go to programs and can pull themselves out of that. I wasn't one of those people, but what I was, and I'm very thankful for, is I got a very bad case of acute pancreatitis. And I was 25 years old. I was in the hospital for just under a month, and had to have 5 blood transfusions and almost died twice. And I lost 60 pounds in total, like 40 pounds in the first 2 weeks. It was from drinking. And laying there when you're 25 years old and you think you're invincible and being faced with your own mortality is a very eye-opening experience. And that was the last time I had a sip of alcohol, and that's been 16 plus years. But I came out of the hospital with a much better appreciation for life. I was a professional lacrosse player as well, and some of your listeners might have to look up what lacrosse is, but it's Canada's Canada's national summer sport. Hockey's our national winter sport. I still play hockey. But I was a professional lacrosse player. I was having a great season, the best season of my life, because now I was sober, I was healthy, I was starting to pay attention to what I was eating, I was going back to the gym, and then I had a career-ending knee injury, and I thought, okay, well, everything happens for a reason. It is what it is. I had a good go of it. I was 26 at the time, and I decided to look into doing some modeling. And I did so because my mom was a model in the late 70s and early 80s, and she'd always talk about fashion and stuff like that, and I thought, yeah, I'll go and check it out. I'll go see what the good agencies are, and if they say no, then okay. If they say yes, then we'll see what happens. And then, that's when I got my first modeling contract about 15 years ago, and it was awesome.
So that's quite the story.
Cool. That's just the beginning.
You have a lifetime of stories, decades.
You bet. We all do, but yes, you bet.
So, I have some questions. So, when I was about 20, I had a quarter life crisis. I think some people have quarter life crisis, and in my family, there's a history of mental illness, schizophrenia, panic disorders, and I was also having panic attacks, and they wanted to give me SSRIs. And at the time, one of the reasons I wasn't in healthcare at the time, I was doing physics. At the time, I wish I knew more because I didn't really understand the research papers, but I could at least understand the SSRI reports being like, I can understand this phrase, SSRIs are no better than placebo. So I was like, okay, no, I'm not going to take the SSRIs. But that being said, a lot of people think SSRIs are very important, and in some ways they are. But obviously they weren't sufficient for you, and you ended up going on to alcohol.
Well, I was taking SSRIs at the same time. So I started taking them back then, and I'm still taking them to this day.
Okay.
But I was adding a little bit extra medication on top with the alcohol.
Okay.
And yeah, it was Yeah, it was just, like I said, it was extra, my own little medication, self-medication.
So when I say SSRIs are no better than placebo, I don't want you to stop taking SSRIs today.
Oh, I'm not going to, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, no.
Some people hear one thing and then they jump, oh, I'm going to stop that today, or I'm going to start that today.
No. I've gone off of them, and I've done a lot of my own research and stuff, and I've seen how, and for me, they are nice, a little help, just a little extra help. The majority of how I live my life and how I function is a result of the tools and the life experience that I've gained in the years that I've gone through things. And not just, there's a pill for that, but there is, it is a bit of extra help, like I say, because I've gone off them and stuff like that. But the real thing that helps the most is the tools and the education, educating yourself and understanding what you're going through, why your body feels a certain way, what you're dealing with, what the symptoms look like, why you feel a certain way, all those things. Those are the really big things. And yeah, that's what I was talking to people about too, is when I came out of the hospital and I learned about what I had, and I started to, I quit drinking. And it took a long time. Over the next 15 years, I was educating myself and learning as I go. I was making a concerted effort to learn things, but more and more information comes out about this kind of stuff, and you start to learn more. And sometimes in my life I was more eager to learn, and other times I was just in a massive depression.
You had to end up in the hospital at one point to learn a lesson.
Yeah, hospital a couple times, but yeah, and other times I was just buried in depression. I didn't want to learn about anything. I just didn't want to bother with it anymore. So yeah, I started modeling, and I got the opportunity to travel, start modeling internationally. And my first stop was Cape Town. It was a wonderful place. Spent 6 months there. Fantastic people, beautiful country. It was a fantastic trip. Then I went to Miami. I had an unfortunate incident when I was in Miami. So I got in there as 2 days into it, and I went to a casting, and I was sexually assaulted by a designer while on a casting.
No.
And it's really interesting because people who know me really well, they know that I've been in a lot of physical altercations. I've been in a lot of fights, like whether it's lacrosse, whether it's bar fights, whether it's sticking up for my friends, whatever. I've been in lots of fights. I've won a lot of fights. I've lost a lot of fights, but whatever. I know how to handle myself. And when it started happening, I was so caught off guard as to what is going on? And then my next thought was, okay, I'm going to beat this person to death. And then I thought about, okay, I can't do that because then I'll go to jail and I probably will end up killing this person. And I just ended up getting myself out of the situation. I said, but it's not something that I ever talked about. I didn't tell my agency. I didn't tell anybody, even until probably maybe 2 years ago. It's the first time I ever talked about it. And that was 13 years ago, I guess. So it was something, and it was the confusion, the frustration, the anger, the shame, the not understanding, all those kinds of things that I didn't want to divulge. And then at the same time too, because I started getting to international modeling, I'm a larger guy. I carry muscle naturally. I build muscle naturally, just my genetics, whatever. And I was working out like a professional athlete still, and I got to these international markets, and I realized that these guys aren't as big as I am. They're just very cut, and I'm twice the size of these guys. And so I started to plant a little seed of body dysmorphia. And about 2 weeks after that happened in Miami, I was like, okay, I'm going to completely flip the script, and I'm just going to run and do abs. And then I started an 8-year battle with an eating disorder as well. And I always say that I was a functioning bulimic because I would wake up, I'd eat my healthy meals, keep everything. I was really taking my vitamins. I was very stringent about that. But and this is a common theme throughout my life, it was when my day was coming to a close and I was going to have to be alone, like with my thoughts. And my thing has always been, like a lot of people who deal with addiction and stuff, it's better than feeling your feelings, like, so I would just get a bunch of junk food, eat, whatever. And then, so I dealt with that for about 8 years, kept traveling, London, New York, shoots all over the place. A lot of time spent in New York. Lots of great memories and great times as well. Like, it's not all bad by any means. Then I decided I wanted to move back to Toronto, and I'd really become passionate about fitness. I was ready to start my own fitness business, and I was ready to really, put down roots. Traveling all the time is wonderful, but it starts to wear on you, when you're in a market. And, for me, it was like, okay, I'm just starting to get the lay of the land, got my local gym. I'm, started to date this girl, like everything. And then, agency calls and like, hey, we just got a new thing. You got to go to London now. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I'm excited to go to London, but I just started, okay, whatever. So I kind of started to wear on me. And then when I moved back, like I said, I found though that in hindsight, traveling was just another distraction, because once I had that removed from my life and I was coming back to the same apartment every day, that was another thing where I realized that the adventure and the just the newness and the excitement of being in a new place and stuff, that was all gone. It was just, I was coming back to the same place. So, but like I said, I wanted to start my fitness business like I did. I wanted to get a dog, which I did. She's over there not feeling so great today. But I realized, like, I've got all this stuff that I'm dealing with, and I'm, not really dealing with it very well. So, that's the next chapter. But I'll let you ask any questions you have based on that. I don't want to go on.
So I was wondering when the personal trainer part was going to kick in.
Yeah. So, like I said, I came out of the hospital with a much better appreciation for my body, and I wanted to learn about my body. This is kind of before YouTube. Internet was it wasn't what it is now. So it was just, picking up magazines, getting my subscription to Muscle and Fitness, reading, talking to people in the gym, making a lot of mistakes, a lot of injuries, that kind of stuff. The whole idea of, like, maybe next time I go to Subway, I won't get a double meatball with triple cheese. Maybe I'll get like a turkey on whole wheat, and seeing how my body shifted like that. So, and I wanted to pass that on to other people, just because of seeing how great it it feels to be good to your body, and how your body will be good back to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
now I wrote it down. You don't have to answer this question. I don't think I've talked about this publicly, but I had let's say, negative forced sexual encounter. I'd say assault. And since then, I cannot perform if I smell like the smell of alcohol. Like, it's just totally off-putting, that it just shuts me down. My wife doesn't drink, so it's not an issue now. But yeah, I obviously had some sort of traumatic. It was a traumatic experience, and it affected me at a sort of subconscious level. So I guess I'm asking, did that event? It seems like your body's dysmorphia was from separate, just hanging out with these skinnier models, because you were too muscular, right? Which a lot of people would say is a good thing. But did you have any lasting repercussions from the sexual assault? Like, a lot of men don't talk about this stuff.
Sure, and it's something that I like I said, I thought I would take that to my grave. I thought I would take the sexual assault and the eating disorder to my grave, because people want to talk about it. Yeah, I'm a recovering alcoholic, recovering drug addict, mental health, yada yada yada. But those, I would always dance around those things, and I was like, I can never tell those things, because it's not manly, and people are going to treat me differently and look at me differently because of it. And it wasn't until recently that I've come to forgive myself for things that have happened in my life that were out of my control. And also forgive myself for, things that have happened in my life that I was in control with, like, becoming an alcoholic and drug addict and going down that path. But truly forgiving myself and realizing that those things have made me who I am today, and that I'm proud of who I am today. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't change that. And the things that are out of my control, excuse me, okay, they happened. They're unfortunate facts of life. My mom passed away. That incident happened in Miami. Like, I didn't bring that upon myself. It happened. It is what it is. I don't forgive the person, but I don't forget, I forgive myself. And then as far as going like down the path of self-medication and stuff, I just look at it like as I was doing my best, man. I was really doing my best with the tools that I had at the time. I was trying, and I that's as much as I can say to myself now. Is like, at least you were trying, and you were hurting, and you were just trying to keep your head above water. And do I wish I could get all the money back that I spent? Absolutely, because it's a whole lot of money. But I can't get the money back, can't get the time back, and the time is what has made me, and the money is what has made me who I am today. And I'm proud of the person who I am today. I'm constantly trying to work to grow and become a better person for myself first, for my loved ones around me, and then for society in general. I want to keep, and understanding that you have to keep learning and growing, because when I was 18, I had it all figured out, and I was like, you got a question? I got the answer. But it's the older we get, the more we realize we don't know. And, that's why I love coming on and having conversations with people like yourself and stuff, because every time that I do, I take something away from it. I'm like, I can add that to my toolbox if you want, or just to my arsenal, whatever you want to say. Like it's continuing to learn and having that mindset of growth. That's what's helped me so many times. And I talked about it before with regards to educating myself about mental health and why I was feeling the way that I was feeling, and my body was doing the things that it was doing, and why I was doing the things that I was doing. And it was a long education, and it still is continuing. It'll never stop. But
it's an active field, and for every individual, it's different.
Absolutely. It is very active, and it is very different. There's no cookie cutter. Yep. Okay, I feel this way, so you got to do X, Y, and Z, and do that. And it's not. That's why when people come to me, the first thing I say is, if you have access to, which I understand not everybody does, unfortunately, but if you have access to, go see a medical professional. Because I can tell you anecdotally the things that I've done and the things that have worked for me, and there might be some things that can help, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Because some of the things are, things that people need to hear. And another reason why I do these things is because I needed to hear this stuff when I was going through the deepest and the heaviest stuff. And I hadn't heard, people, but especially men, talking about, eating disorders, or, sexual assaults, or, being so open about alcohol and drug addiction. I'm not saying that I'm some kind of guru. I'm just a regular dude, man. I'm just a regular dude trying to share stories and trying to help others, because I know that I need it. But yeah, like I said, there are things that we can do that do translate, but like you said, we're as individuals as our fingerprint, and how we deal with our mental health and what works for me and what works for you is just as different.
I have quite a few questions here. Pancreatitis. So I have a friend of a friend. Oh, actually, I have some patients as well who have gotten pancreatitis, and the culture of drinking is so embedded into American and Canadian culture. Like I don't drink, and there's a lot of social pressure to drink. Basically, people wouldn't stop hounding me at a party until I gave them an excuse. Oh, I don't know. My mother was a drug addict, an alcoholic, and okay, we'll leave you alone. Like it's hard. So the recent story is a friend of a friend. Again, 20s, invincible, diagnosed with pancreatitis, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go down from 8 beers a night down to 2 or 3, because you can't not drink. You have to drink. Mm-hmm. Like if you're not drinking, you're not living. There's that mentality. for you, was it like a light switch? Like, okay, was it like straight into the hospital and be like, okay, I can't have a single drop, or was it leading up being sicker, 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 and you kept on drinking? Was there pressure from society? Was it just the self medication?
Self-medication was what got me there, and the pancreatitis came on so abruptly and so severely. So when I was in the hospital, I was working, down in Toronto. They have all the hospitals in Medical City. Like they have University of Toronto, Mount Sinai, kids, sick kids, and Princess Margaret. And I was in Mount Sinai, but they all work together in conjunction. For those who don't know, they're all like on four corners, these massive hospitals, and they work together. It's pretty incredible. So I was in Mount Sinai, and the doctor from Toronto General was overseeing my case. He was a pancreas specialist, and he was kind of a younger guy. And he said to me as I was getting closer and closer to getting, checked out and getting ready to, be released, he's like, look, man, he's like, the severity of pancreatitis we saw in you it's unheard of. Like we see that level of pancreatitis in somebody who's like 75 and they've been drinking since they were 15 and drinking every day. They're like, we don't know why it was so bad, but it was so bad. And he's like, you got to know that alcohol is never a part of your life. And I said to him, I was like, look, doc, like after going through this and, being in so much pain and being, almost dying twice and stuff, I was like, I'm never going to touch a drop ever again. And he's like, we don't know if you can have one beer or two or whatever. We don't, but he's like, I would suggest you don't find out. I'm like, I am never going to find out again, because this is what put me here. And that was a traumatizing experience. And I know exactly what put me there. And yeah, at first it was hard because I had to learn to do a lot of things sober. I told my friends, like, I still want to be part of the fun, but I'm just not going to drink. And my friends were very supportive about that, especially the ones who were around at the time, because they saw the drastic change. But then as I started to travel and stuff, so I always said, like, invite me out, I'll just be the DD, But I had to learn how to talk to girls sober. I had to learn how to have my first, like, sexual encounters sober. Like, all these things, sober, I had to do them for the first time. It was like relearning. And then as I started to travel and stuff, and you go, you're traveling as a model and you get, free VIP this or whatever and bottle service and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, oh, no, I'm good. I don't drink. And like you said, people are like, come on, just have one. And I'm like, no, I don't drink. I almost died from pancreatitis. And then finally I realized that it's okay to say the word alcoholic. And now people are like, oh, I want to, in the locker room, the boys will be having a couple beers after games and stuff, because we just play adult league and whatever. And, I was like, hey, Niziol, why don't you have a beer? I'm like, I'm a recovering alcoholic of 16 years. And that shuts them down, like completely shuts it down. But for the longest time, I had to explain. And I remember one of my friends in South Africa, he's like, how many times have you told that story? Because I've like, just in hanging out with you, I've heard you had to tell that story dozens of times as to why you don't drink, because people are always like, hey, let's do a shot together. Let's do this. I'm like, no, like in a loud club. No, I don't drink. What? I stink? No, I don't drink. And yeah, like what? Pancreatitis? What? So yeah, it very much is that. And I have no desire to drink. One of the biggest fears I have is accidentally ingesting alcohol and what my body will do to that. Also, what my mind will do to that, because I don't know, I feel like, well, I'm sure of the fact that if I like it, my body goes, oh, we like that. And we're going to do that all the time, from the addictive personality, from my addiction. And so, yeah, like if I go out to somewhere where there's alcohol, I have a bottle of water, my own sealed bottle of water. And the moment it leaves my hands, then I'm done with that bottle of water. I don't trust that, it still is good, or I don't think somebody's going to drug me, whatever. It's just a thing that I'm very, very conscious about. Like I said, I can be around people drinking and all that kind of stuff and has no effect on me at all. But when it comes to drugs and stuff, I put myself in situations where I'm not around them. Again, not because I'm tempted that I'll be that I'll do them, but like say like marijuana was a big problem for me, and it was one of my addictions. And everybody's like, "Oh, it's just weed. You can't get addicted to weed." You can absolutely get addicted to it. And it was ruining my life just the same way that alcohol was ruining my life. And I won't put myself somewhere where there are clouds of smoke, or I'm smelling it and stuff like that, because I don't want any kind of contact high, and I just don't feel comfortable in that situation. So I'm very guarded about putting myself in those situations with regards to drugs and, most of my friends. I also dealt with nitrous oxide, an inhalant. I was addicted to those. Adderall was addicted to as well. So I was like, oh, there's this pill that can make you focus. It can make you super shredded and you keep you motivated. Like, sign me up. And then quickly that got out of hand. And then I was muscle relaxers. And that was my kind of last one, because my body, like the universe, my friend always said, and, to whatever extent, the universe was kind of telling me that these things are not good for me. I was having incidences with each one of them where it was like a breaking point. It was my own. People talk about rock bottoms, and a lot of times I will say that for most of us addicts, we have or have had dozens of rock bottoms. And the final straw could not, for me, wasn't even a fraction of as low as I got on the way there. But it was just the final straw. You know what I mean? Like that rock bottom. It wasn't like, oh, this is my bottom. For me, that's my experience. But so I'd run out of drugs to do. I was always good at like doing kind of like the baseline drugs, not the too heavy stuff. Adderall's pretty heavy. It's like legalized meth. But, smoking weed and doing whippets. And then I moved on to these muscle relaxers. And they were just over-the-counter muscle relaxers. And each pill I'd taken them for years just for like, aches and pains from working out and playing lacrosse and, hockey and stuff like that. And I noticed when I smoked weed and I took a couple extra, I was like, ooh, I feel kind of a little extra loose. Like,
so some people in the audience might not know that muscle relaxers work on the central nervous system. They work with neurotransmitters. So in fact, they are cousins of pills for depression and moods. So it can affect your mood, it can affect your muscles, it can affect your gut, because your gut also runs on neurotransmitters. So it has full systemic effects beyond the muscles. Sorry, you can continue.
Yeah, I hadn't heard it explained that way either, so now I know. But that makes a lot of sense as to what I was going through. So each pill had 500 milligrams of methocarbamol. That was the active muscle relaxing part of it. And then 200 milligrams of ibuprofen. That was the pain relief, anti-inflammatory part of it. So it says not to exceed, 12 per day or whatever. And I'm like, that's for other people. And pretty quickly, I got up to taking 100 pills a day. I was taking 100 pills every single day, 50,000 milligrams of methocarbamol and 20,000 milligrams of ibuprofen every single day. I would go on to the pharmacy, Shoppers back home.
Yeah.
I'd go into Shoppers, I get the generic version, Life brand. No free ads, Life brand.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying anything bad about Life brand, obviously this is me. But I would get them, they're like $38 and change. I'd get a bottle of 100. I'd come home, I'd put like 40 in there in my hand. I'd just swallow it down. And by the end of the day, I would have taken 100. And I'd do the same thing the next day.
You are lucky to be alive.
I am extremely lucky to be alive. There was one time that they have different combinations. So they have acetaminophen and methocarbamol. I stuck with the ibuprofen. One time they didn't have the ibuprofen, so I got the acetaminophen. I took a bunch and I passed out. I woke up vomiting all over my bed, and I almost killed myself by just ingesting that massive amount of that.
So again, for the audience, I'll give some of these numbers some context. Acetaminophen, the recommended daily amount is very close to the LD50. Like, it's very close to the maximum safe amount to ingest. In fact, if you're a small person, you shouldn't take the maximum amount of acetaminophen, and that's Tylenol, because it can kill you. If you like take double the dose of acetaminophen, that's a lethal dose of acetaminophen. It's the recommended dose is so close to a lethal dose. Now, ibuprofen, you can get away with taking too much ibuprofen. It's still not good for you. The bad thing about ibuprofen is more the chronic use. So you can go way above the recommended dose for ibuprofen. It tends to lose its beneficial effects, so there's no benefit to taking more than the recommended doses for ibuprofen. The reason why ibuprofen is potentially lethal is with chronic use, you can get ulcers and you can bleed out through your stomach and your intestines. So sorry for that aside. Continue.
No, that is a perfect aside, because I started to notice things like my energy levels were way down. And when I would sit down and stand up, I would get extremely lightheaded. And I had no strength and everything like that. And I'm just like, oh, you're just being a wimp. And are you just feeling that way because you took 100 pills yesterday? Like, you're probably just feeling the effects. I had major internal bleeding from intestinal ulcer. And I didn't laugh. Yeah, no, it's true. And it's funny but I didn't see any result of it. I wasn't passing blood in my urine, in my stool. There was no indication of it except for how I was feeling. So I was just going on, and then I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, like with a lot of things with addiction and alcoholism and everything, you start seeing all these things happening in your life, or crumbling, whatever you want to say. And it's like, oh, I need more carbs. I need to take a day off the gym. I need to do this. Whereas the answer is always right in front of us. It's like, it's blaringly like neon signs, like this is like smarten up, like, but you want to say everything else is like, oh, I've got too much right now. I'm dealing with a lot. I've got, works. So I finally got to the point with that, and, got back in the hospital just right in time. Red blood cell count was way low. And that's when I said to myself, okay, like I'm 35 years old now. Not now, but at the time I said to myself, I'm 35 years old. And this plan that I've had for the last 15 years hasn't been working, because, here I find myself, and I can either graduate to the next level of drugs and do the oxy, whatever, or in cocaine. And as soon as I do that, my life as I know it is done. Or I could do something else that's drastic and different, and that was go to therapy. And I find, because for years it was like, I don't have time to go to therapy. I had time to do drugs. I don't have money to go to therapy. I had lots of money for drugs. I wimps. I'm not going to sit there and have somebody judge me for the things that I've done. All these things that I would tell myself. It's not manly, yada, yada, whatever. All that BS. And it was like, okay, this isn't working. So at 35, I went to therapy, and I had to learn how to be a sober, functioning adult for the first time in my life, because I never had been that. Even when I was sober, I was still... The few years that I was sober after pancreatitis, before I started the drugs and stuff, I was still working out excessively, and there were other distractions. This is the first time I had to learn to live without distractions. And I started going to therapy, doing cognitive behavioral, so just one-on-one, sitting down with a therapist and talking about a lot of the stuff that happened in my life and the things that happened before my mom passed away and stuff like that, and learning how to live. And I went there with the desire to gain the tools. And I wanted to, and I hearken back to my childhood growing up on the farm. And this is where I'm so glad that my parents instilled these morals and values in me, and also with my athletics. But, it'd be winter in Canada, and my father owned an architecture design business as well, and he'd be off on a business trip, and I was the son, so he and I ran the farm, and it'd be winter, it'd be minus 30, minus 40, and the cows need hay, and it's like, okay, I've got to go do that. Like, I don't feel like doing it, but who cares about your feelings? These animals rely upon you, and get out there and do it. It's like, okay. And the same thing about like the summertime. It's a beautiful summer day, just wonderful. My friends are up at their cottage or their lake house, for those around the world, whatever you call it, just somewhere like a getaway. And, they're jumping off their docks, having fun. And, we've got 3 or 4 days of 14-hour days of doing hay to do. And it's like, okay, let's do it. Like, we have to do it. There's no want to. Yeah, I'd rather be, chasing a tennis ball around or swimming in the lake, whatever. But okay. And that's the same mentality that I went back to, and I said, okay, this is who I am. And this is who I need to, this is the same mentality I need to go into this with, is this is not going to beat me. I'm going to beat it. And I want to learn the tools. I want to learn them to take control of my life. I don't want to be reliant on calling somebody every time that, calling my therapist every time that I need something and be like, hey, should I buy 2% milk or half and half? I wanted to be able to make my own decisions and learn the tools, and worked with a therapist for quite a long time in Canada. Really started to gain the tools, moved down here to Texas. I still go to a therapist more as like a check-in, and, not as often as I was, but yeah, man, it was hard. It was extremely hard, because for the first time in my life, all these boxes of, I'd compartmentalized all these traumas and all these things that I've been putting off for years with substances. Now they were just crashing in on me, and I had no substance to fall back on. Mm-hmm. So it was extremely hard, but it was, like I said, it was that mentality of, this is not going to beat me. I say that now, but I thought it was going to beat me so many times throughout that period, but that was the mentality that I had, and I kept fighting. And for me, I always say, look for the positive. Try and focus on the positive. There seems like there's so much negative going on around you when you're in that situation, when you're in depression, when you're in, severe anxiety, when, whatever, when you're in situations. And it seems like all we can focus on is the negative. It's so much going on around us. And I'd go through days where I would just feel like, what is the point, man? This is just, it's never going to change. It's never going to get better. And then my dog would walk by and do something silly, and it would just, snap me out of it for a second. And I would try and focus on that positivity, or, I promised her that, excuse me, when I got her, I was going to give her the best life that I could. And I had to take her out. We lived in an apartment at the time. I had to take her out 2-3 times a day. And whether I wanted to, whether I felt like it, whether my head was telling me that I should do this or that. So we get out, we walk around the block and be like, okay, great. I needed that. So really try and focus on the positives in your life, and don't, again, it's easier said than done. Trust me, because I've been there. And, even still, you have your bad moments, and you're like, man, when is it going to stop? And it's like, okay, let me pull back for a second and realize, things, I've got a lot of positive things going on right now, a lot of things that are really going well. And yes, these things are real, and it's not to say that they're to be dismissed or not, acknowledged. Yes, absolutely. But let's focus on problem solving. Let's focus on solutions. Let's focus on positive, because the more we sit there and worry, it's like a rocking chair. It gives us something to do. It doesn't get us anywhere. It just keeps us occupied. And yeah, it's a big thing for me. And I think that's one of the things that I talk to people most about, is try and focus on the positive, whatever that positive is for you, having a conversation with your grandmother or whatever it is, that kind of thing.
So obviously you learned a lot of this the hard way.
Oh yeah, I have to. That's the person I am. I have to make my own mistakes.
But a lot of what you're saying could just as well be a lecture on how cognitive behavioral therapy works.
Totally.
So you've obviously taken a lot of lessons. You've learned it and taken those tools for yourself. You've stolen them from your therapist.
Yeah.
Because why not?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And it's amazing, because I always say that the therapist I worked with in Toronto, she was meant to be a therapist. And my therapist here is really good as well, but she was meant to be a therapist. I worked with her for 3 years. I'd see her every week at the beginning, every couple of weeks as things going on. She never took a single note on paper. She never, and every day that we'd show up, we would pick up right where we left off. She remembered, names, she remembered places, she remembered, and it was like, sometimes I needed to talk. And then sometimes I needed for her to explain the lesson there and stuff like that. She's absolutely incredible at what she does. And yeah, it was exactly that. And that's why I'm still grabbing lessons from people and, keeping them for putting them in my tool chest, in my tool bag, because I want to keep learning these tools and these things that we can use going forward. And I think that's a big thing. That's why I love what you're doing with your platform, having conversations like this and putting things out there that people can, relate to and see and hear and be like, man, I personally, speaking about me, I thought I was never going to get through being an alcoholic. I never thought I was going to, like I said, I resigned to the fact I was going to be a drug addict. I resigned to the fact that I was never going to get out of this mental health funk. And, here I am now, living my version of a balanced life. I was going to say normal, but what is normal? But I'm living a balanced life. And like I said, I'm dealing with the ups and downs of every day, but I'm feeling the ups and downs, which is a wonderful thing to feel once you've been grayed out and comfortably numb for so many years, for decades. The highs feel that much higher and the lows feel that much lower. But I love that part of life is, the ups and downs, where before I was living in this thing like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that sucks. Oh, that's cool. Oh, that sucks. It was just like in this small window of, grayness. And now it's the, bigger. You can't feel the highs unless you feel the lows. And just really, and like I said, I'm just some regular dude. I'm not anything special, just some regular guy. Oh, it's a Blue Jay. Go figure. A couple of Canadians talking, and the Blue Jay just flew by in Texas. For those listening, the Toronto Blue Jays is our professional baseball team. So
the last one left in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. The final one. So that's what I say is if you have availability to a medical health professional, I would say go and talk to them. A lot of people don't, unfortunately, and I understand that. And it can be very expensive. There are tools out there and stuff like that. But even, find somebody you can confide in and talk with them. Start talking about it. Because the more it rattles around your brain, the more crazy things your brain's going to do with it. And they're not going to be, more than likely, they're not going to be positive things. So that's kind of how I live my life. I mean,
do I have time for one? I see a lot of patients. I actually worked in a rehab facility when I was in Portland. And a lot of people for drug rehab facility. It was an inpatient. They were basically brought in and they weren't allowed to leave. So it was they had to sleep there. They had to attend courses and classes, and they were put on drugs to try to get them off the drugs. But a lot of people were there from oxycodone, from basically they were injured and they got addicted to painkillers.
Okay.
It seems like you had other issues causing your issues, but it parallels in a similar fashion that addictive nature of drugs. And you could have gone that way because of your knee injury.
Yep.
And I want to touch on that because you mentioned knee injury and then you said, okay, and I still play sports and I got healthy. And a lot of people, once they get a knee injury, they're like, well, that's it, I'm done.
Yeah, I have an interesting mentality towards that. So I still play hockey 4 times a week on 4 different teams, and I won't take a prescription painkiller. Like I've gone to the doctor and had procedures taken, and they're like, can we give you a? I'm like, nope. I'm like, you got the wrong guy. Like if it's pain, that's just a state of mind. I'll deal with it. So I broke 2 ribs playing hockey, and I was like, okay, my side kind of hurts. Kept playing hockey. Finally, a week later, I went and I was like, they're definitely broken because it's mushy. I just want to see how broken they are. Okay, they're broken. 2 ribs cracked, whatever. I had some guy cheap shot at me and put his knee out, and I had my MCL completely ripped off my femur. And I took 1 day off from the gym, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to the gym and I'll do 200 flights of stairs today. 2 days earlier, having just had my MCL ripped off. And I was like, okay, if I feel pain, then that's a state of mind. I can deal with that. If I feel like I'm doing more damage, then I'll deal with that. And again, I will rarely take a Advil or Tylenol or something like that, like very rarely. But yeah, I went to the doctor for the MCL thing. And they're like, yeah, it's completely torn. You're going to have to get surgery. I'm like, darn. And all the while I'm running, 7 to 10 miles a day with a torn knee. I'm playing 3 or 4 hockey games still with a torn knee. So I came in to book the surgery 6 weeks later, and the doctor's like, okay, let's book a surgery. It's like, how's it been feeling? I'm like, doc, I've literally played 25 games of hockey since I saw you. And I've literally run hundreds of miles and done thousands of flights of stairs. And he looked at everything. He's like, wow, like this comes back to my personal training background of knowing how to rehab, knowing how to keep things in the right place, not allowing myself to affect my gait. And no matter how much it hurt, I was always going to walk straight. I was not going to start to, and he's like, man, you're good to go. Like, we'll do a lot more damage if we go in there. Like, everything's straight and you're not in pain. Like, so to answer your question, I won't take a pill like that. I won't take anything like that. I won't be put under. Things like that. I won't do it.
So I'll add some to your story. Full ruptures of the ACL and the MCL can spontaneously heal, even full ruptures. Some people think ACL tear, you need to get a surgery. 70% of the time, it heals on its own. It reattaches. The body is designed to reattach these things. If it doesn't, then they can go in and then they can attach it.
Yeah. Same with my PCL. That's why I didn't get surgery for my PCL when that tore playing lacrosse, and never have, and it's reattached.
And another big thing, I work with a lot of people with chronic pain, and it's the no limping thing. The limping causes the pain. So much pain in the hips and the knees with the limping and the walking crooked. And well, you're a personal trainer. How many people like go to get on a step and their knee buckles, their whole hips go out of alignment, and no wonder they have hip pain. When I mimic what they do, it hurts my hips and my knees.
Yeah, it's very true. And that's the thing that I've learned from learning about the body and from personal training and stuff like that. And like working on my gait pattern for a long time, I was walking very narrowly. So I was getting pain in my lower back and my hips because I wasn't using my transverse abdominals. I was putting a lot of the pressure on my lower back, and I had to learn how to widen my gait and just learn how to walk again properly. And like I said, I won't compromise that. Like if I get, if I'm in pain or something, I won't, I'm not trying to sound like a hero or whatever, but I just won't limp. I won't allow myself to, because I've seen so many people who come in, and we all have, muscular imbalances and skeletal imbalances and stuff like that from life, from injuries and stuff like that. And I've helped so many people with my clients and myself, putting things back into alignment and learning how to work out and put things and work them out in the right way. So I'm very, very aware and cognizant of that. And it's the human body is a incredible, machine. It's beyond a machine. What it does is, it's absolutely incredible. And that's one of the things that I fell in love with the more and more that I've gone through my journey and learning about health and nutrition and, working out properly and, all the mistakes I made there. And, just continuing to learn about how incredible this thing is that we have. And, it's to be taken care of, but mistakes are to be made. Like you said, I'm the kind of person where, if I would have just sat at home and took my dad's advice, then I would have avoided a lot of these things. But if I could go back to 21-year-old Jonathan and tell him, what the next 21 years of his life are going to look like, I wouldn't say don't drink. I wouldn't say don't do drugs. I wouldn't say don't go to Miami. I wouldn't say any of those things. I would just say it's going to take a long time. It's going to be very hard, but just know that you're going to get through it. And you are just keep fighting because you're going to get through it. I wouldn't change any of the things that I've been through. I wouldn't go back and like I said, I wouldn't say don't pick up a drink, none of that. All those things I needed to go through to become the person I am today. And I think we so often as addicts or people who struggle with mental health, we look at ourselves and we say, oh, you're a failure. You're a loser. You're always going to be this. And we talk to ourselves, that way. And it's really important that we change that narrative and we start showing ourselves the grace that, we give other people and practicing it and truly learning forgiveness and patience with ourselves.
That ties in again with the cognitive behavioral therapy, the positive psychology, the topic of the self-image. If we label ourselves as a failure, as I'm always going to be addicted, then it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Our subconscious is going to help us reinforce that.
Yes, exactly.
I love that you use the word fighting because it's a fight.
It's a battle. It is an absolute battle. It is an everyday, it's a constant battle, harder at sometimes. Sometimes it's a war, but it is absolutely is those things, and it's the most important and the most rewarding fight of our lives. Is if there's nothing worth fighting for, if there's nothing else worth fighting for in your life, this is what is worth fighting for, and it will ripple affect your whole life.
A lot of people are just sitting on their couch waiting for things to become easy, waiting for the one doctor's appointment where they're just going to give them a pill and everything's going to get better.
Yeah.
And it's not like that. It's a fight.
It is.
Every successful man I've talked to who's managed to work through a difficult time has almost expressed that they had to get angry. Oh, then I one day I just this is not me anymore. I have to change. I have to do it this way, or I have to start fighting for this and that. And yeah. I think there might be something universal to that.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with that. I have heard that as well, and I've lived that. And it's funny because I'd be going through my stuff and I'd be talking to my buddies. And I'm like, man, I'm feeling this way and that way. And they're like, dude, you're Jonathan Niziol, man. You're the guy who's traveled the world. And I'm like, I don't feel like that person. Like, I don't feel like that person. I'm not that person. They're like, yes, you are. It's like, and finally, when I was starting to come out of it, I would have these moments of clarity when I'm sitting in my apartment, sober, all these things spiraling around, and I'd think of something positive and I'd write it down, like something as simple as, you can do this and you are capable of doing whatever. And I would put it on my wall next to my kitchen, a piece of paper taped to my wall next to my kitchen. So every time I went to my kitchen, I'd have to see it. And same thing, I'd do something in the bathroom, and just little, I guess they're little silly things, but the things that I needed to see and be reminded of on a regular basis. Because I'd get up and go to the kitchen 1 minute and I'd say, you can do it. And I'd come back and say, you can't do it.
Yeah.
You absolutely can't do it. So I needed that. And it's funny, I don't really talk about that too much because it never really gets deep enough too. But yeah, I would write these things down, and I would write down a list of like when I was feeling and I was in that fight or flight mode and I was ready to fight, I'd just write something down. And like I said, I had a list of things I put up there, and it definitely helped. But yeah, it's an absolute battle. It is an absolute battle, but it's the most necessary, and it always will be a fight, but to different extents once you start to learn things, but life happens. So keep pushing, keep fighting. So
this has been an amazing hour. I think this is the best interview I've had.
I appreciate that. It's been fantastic. I've gotten a lot of this too. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming in and talking. Do you have any last words?
Yeah, I would say that if you're going through something, like I said, just try and focus on the positive. Fight, fight your inner demons. Our brains are our greatest assets, or our worst enemies, mm-hmm. and we have to really work to keep them. And it's still every day. It's a tug of war either side, so you have to really work. But it is absolutely worth it. I love connecting with people. I love hearing from people. I love learning from people. After doing podcasts and stuff like that, I love to keep hearing from people and like I said, to learn from others. So if you want to connect with me on social media, I'm sure Brandon will put all that in the show notes and stuff like that. But keep listening to Brandon's podcast because he's a smart guy. And he has really great choice in hosts or in guests.
Yeah, the best guests for sure.
Yes, it's a Canadian connection. But no, it's been a fantastic hour. I really appreciate it, and I hope someone out there somewhere is listening and can take some stuff from this conversation. And I just want to help my fellow human being and make the world a better place. And however we can do that, I'm all for it.
Well, thank you again. And to my listeners, I hope you learned something interesting and it helps you in your day-to-day lives. And I wish you all the best. Cheers.